And could we have a roll call, please?
Calling the roll, Mr. Gallagher,
Here.
Ms. Baker, Mr. Tuma,
Here.
Mr. Brady, Ms. Conwell. Ms. Conwell is absent at the moment. There is a quorum.
Thank you. Public comment?
Yes, Ms. Lori Albright.
Good afternoon, lady and gentlemen. My name is Lori Albright. I live in University Heights. I'm a part of the Coalition to Stop the Inhumanity at the Cuyahoga County Jail. I wish to make 2 points. In follow-up to this committee's meeting 2 weeks ago, the response I heard to your question, a good one, regarding the empty beds at the Euclid facility and the overcrowding at the downtown facility, was that the jail staff were helpless because the medical staff had to clear any individuals before they could be transferred to Euclid. I found it incredulous that only 21 people could be medically cleared out of 2,000 individuals at the downtown jail. I asked after the meeting and learned, and this makes sense, that only persons who will be in jail for some time would be candidates for the medical clearing. It would not make sense to transfer people to Euclid, only to transfer them back and forth for court things. And it appears that perhaps 300 individuals in the jail meet that criteria of people who are going to be there for a while and aren't going to be going back and forth. So, if the medical clearance is done at the request of the jail's officials, this begs the question of why more individuals have not been requested to be rescreened to relieve some of the overcrowding at the downtown facility. I would like an answer to that question. My second point, I read in the Plain Dealer that the proposed jail budget is based on a population of 2,000 people. That number is more than 200 over capacity. To me, this is outrageous. Why are we planning for continued overcrowding at the jail? If the bail reforms that were identified in the March 2018, over a year ago, report were implemented, you would consistently have many fewer people in jail and not be over capacity. At your last committee's meeting, I noted the success Akron has had. Please use your power to pressure the necessary players to enact these needed reforms. You wouldn't be overstepping your bounds and telling them what to do. You are asking them to enact their own recommendations. Please, with urgency, people's lives are at stake. Thank you.
Thank you.
No one else is signed in.
Okay. In your packets, you have the minutes of April 2nd. If they're in order, I'll accept the motion.
So moved.
All in favor? Aye. Against? Thank you very much. Resolution 219-0095.
And also like to reflect that Councilwoman Conwell is here.
Welcome, ma'am.
Resolution number 2019-0095, making an award on requisition number 44486 to DLR Group, doing business as DLR Group, Westlake Reed Laskowski, in the amount not to exceed $1,400,000 for programming services for the Justice Center Complex Project.
Good afternoon, members of the Public Safety Committee. Michael Dever with the Department of Public Works. I'm here before you today to talk on the item that's been referred to committee, the resolution to make award to the DLR Group. In attendance with me also is Jeff Applebaum from the PMC Group, which, as many of you may recall, back in January, we awarded an owner's representative contract to their firm to provide assistance with the Justice Center Complex Committee, or the Justice Center Complex Project. In regards to the item that's before us today, there's a brief PowerPoint that I have available. Okay, she's not moving. Oh, she is bound. Oh, there it is.
That's the last.
This is,
Isn't this here? So just do that.
all right, very good, thanks. So we have an agenda of items to cover today. The first item, it's Still not Motoroid. Well, we handed out a copy of the presentation to you, so we're having technical difficulties here. Anyways, we're going to give you a brief background of the item before you, the role of the programmer, the selection process and recommendation, and the proposed agreement. So the first item I'd like to talk about is the MOU that was created to create the Justice Center Steering Committee. As many of you recall, an MOU was developed, and it included 12 participants from the courts to the city of Cleveland to the county representation. That group had been seated, and from that group, we then selected a selection committee, a subcommittee of them. So if you go to page 4, okay, and then we'll go to the next one. There it is. Okay, the Programmer Selection Committee. So these were the individuals that participated in the selection committee, from Judge John Russo of the Common Pleas Court, admin judge, Matt Sprantz from the cities of Cleveland's Mayor's Office of Capital Project, Lisa Williamson, I believe she's First Assistant to County Prosecutor O'Malley, Alex Pelham from the County Public Safety Office, Matt Carroll, County Executive's Office, Matt Reimer, who's in charge of our facilities group with Public Works, and myself. Also in attendance was Jeff Applebaum, Steve Zanoni from PMZ, Mike Waz from the Kitchell Group, Public Defender Mark Stanton, Mark Budzar, Ian Frank from Franz Ward, who's been representing the Common Pleas Court, and Nicole and Adrian Simons from Public Works. I'm just not having luck here. So the program selection process, well, we issued our RFQ back on January 11th. It was actually the week before we selected PMC. The pre-qualification conference took place on the 23rd. Qualifications were all submitted on February 8th. We did an initial review. We had 3 proposals that came in. We shortlisted, and we decided we would interview all 3 proposals. That took place on March 5th. And then a selection committee, we ranked the proposals. And like I said, that selection group came together, and they made a determination to take this forward to the steering committee, which on March 14th, we held the steering committee. This was the first public vote of that steering committee. And by unanimous action, they agreed that this was the ideal group to move forward with. We then entered into contract negotiations the week of March 18th, and then we brought the item before this council back on April 9th, and obviously that brings us to today's committee hearing. So with that being said, I'm going to let Jeff take over and give an overview of the process.
Good afternoon. We'll see if we can. So very briefly, we had 3 groups that proposed, and these were, and you see the lead members of the group, but every group had several sub-consultants with great expertise in programming of detention facilities and court facilities. And the 3 groups were the DLR Group, which is a national firm that recently merged with the local Westlake Reed Laskowski firm, and 2 other groups, HDR and HOK. All of them were extremely well qualified, and so we did day-long interviews with all of those groups. The observations, by the way, all were very qualified. They together are the 3 leading groups that do this kind of work in the country. They are attracted to this opportunity. They understand the importance and significance of what's going on in detention here, especially in the last year with courts. They brought with them extraordinary expertise. The presentations were excellent. All 3 of them could be or could have been the design architect ultimately for this project, but at this stage, it's not the ultimate design we're concerned about, it's programming, which is figuring out what the best options are, both with respect to operational programming, architectural programming, and I do want to point out to everybody, all options are on the table. No decisions have been made yet. So whether this is a renovation, a build new on another location, splitting the jails facilities with the courts, doing them together. All these options are on the table. And everyone understood that and brought the expertise necessary to help talk about programming alone. When we looked at the groups, while they were all excellent, we saw distinctions that led to the ultimate recommendation. And the ultimate recommendation, and this is actually the scoring sheet that you see here, but the ultimate recommendation was for the DLR group. All of them well qualified, but we had a preference with respect to the precise support and particularly the sub-consultants. And I'm going to talk about them in a second, that the DLR group brought forward. They also had an excellent project methodology that matched our own concept of how this should be done. And here you see the scoring and based on the criteria that was set out. So the group, and this is a busy graphic, but essentially the national player is DLR. They have tremendous expertise in detention and court planning. There are 3 primary national consultants that are part of the group. DWA, Dan Wiley, is an internationally and nationally known court programming planner. He's done dozens and dozens of contemporary court facility programs. He's also done renovation court programs, understands modern courts, modern court practice, architectural programming concepts, modern trends, very impressive. The other 2 that you see here, Chin Planning. Chin is one of the leading detention planners, as is Pulitzer Bogart. They both are excellent in detention planning. The thing that was impressive about these groups is it's one thing to talk about architectural planning. They understand process planning and operational planning. They are at the forefront of understanding how you deal with mental health issues, how you deal with medical issues, how you deal with diversion, how you deal with separating and addressing what populations should be addressed by the court system and how they should be addressed, and how facilities follow the function. And very impressive in all of those roles, including individuals, whether it's gender equality, all of these issues are phenomenally well addressed by these groups. Very impressive on what they've done and what they know. So this group has done at least 50 recent justice programming studies. They've been involved collectively in over 500 Justice Center projects. Once again, there's various components, various teams that have done various projects. Over 200 completed in the last 9 years. They put in place over 9 million square foot of Justice Center space, of contemporary modern or facilities that use modern concepts. They've won significant awards in doing this, and they have recent Ohio experience as well, understanding some of the standards in Ohio, so extremely well qualified. The observation is that the team had excellent understandings of the specific issues and needs in Cuyahoga County. They came here aware of our history, aware of the specific problems, aware of the specific needs, and aware of operational programming as opposed to just architectural programming with tremendous insight and expertise. They presented a staff that was very well qualified to address the very specific concerns that arise in this system. Their methodology is this will be about an 11-month process to get this completely done. It's organized around a specific series of workshops. Now keep in mind, when this committee structure was adopted, this steering committee probably is a public body. It does require, and we will have an open process. These are going to be open meetings. And it requires a super majority determination. As you saw in my contract that you approved, every major determination, it's my obligation to get 10 of 12 members of this committee to agree. I'm choking up now just because I keep thinking about that. It's a problem, but it's a good thing because that means that we're going to get to consensus one way or the other as we drive this process. It's going to be organized around 8 workshops, and you can generally look at this screen to get an idea, but it's a very organized concept. We start with organizational kickoffs. We form subcommittees. There's a tremendous amount of work where we and the programmers go and assess conditions. We talk to various user groups. We talk to various folks within the detention system, within the court system, about what their needs are, how they operate the building, how personnel is established. It's just a very significant effort, thousands and thousands of man hours in a very short period of time to assess all this information. At that point in time, we start to come up with potential solutions. We look at it in parallel, whether it's a renovation, a build new, or a combination. We develop preliminary programs, look at alternatives, refine those alternatives, reconcile comments with what we hear from the community, and we end up with a final program and proposed architectural master plan at the end. Obviously, at the end of the day, any recommendation, at the same time that's being developed, there'll be parallel conversations that you'll have regarding funding, regarding method of going forward, and it will all come back to you. But this is the mission of what we need to do. We need to figure out what the actual needs are, and we need to figure out how to do it in the most efficient and effective process, and that's what the programmers do in connection with our efforts. Assuming that we can move forward with the approval of this contract, we begin the first week of May. That will be workshop number 1, and it will be a full-day effort, and so that's where we're at.
Right, actually, we've got a tentative date right now, May 7th, as having that first kickoff meeting with the programmer. I'd like to also make note that we have representatives of the programmer here with us today. Both Clyde Twine and Matt Janik are back here also that could answer questions if you'd like. So with that, we're open to questions.
Questions from the committee? Yes, ma'am.
Through the chair to Director Dever, just want to know where are we planning on him holding the workshops? These are public meetings, correct?
That's right. So, so far, we've held our first few meetings over at the Global Center or at the Convention Center, one or the other, and I'm trying to leave it somewhere central where it's easy for people to gain access to, but they may change. We may hold something at the Justice Center itself, maybe in the former council chambers. That seems to be a wide open area also. We may hold something at this location into the future, but we hope to create a calendar here very shortly so everyone can put it on so they know when these significant meetings are taking place. So I would foresee that happening within the next month here, a calendar of events.
Okay, and going forward, there will be dates or times that we are not in committee already.
Right.
Okay.
So I'll definitely be looking towards council's calendar and making sure that we're not showing any type of conflict, okay?
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
What kind of folks are you expecting or hoping would attend workshops like this?
So I'm sure Jeff has his thoughts on it, but I intend, obviously the administrative judge is not going to be at these workshops. I'm expecting people under his command ultimately from the probation office, various people in various roles that are going to need to participate because we need to find out from that grassroots level, those people that are actually doing the work of how they currently function. And so it's going to be a fairly large group, and we've already shared with the selection committee that we need strong participation, because if we don't get it right on the front end here, we're going to end up, it'll cost us at a later time.
Well, to be clear, the way this is going to work, and think of these meetings as more or less monthly, every 5 weeks or so. So what's going to happen is between meetings, there's going to be a series of additional meetings. There will be focus group meetings, there will be advisory committee meetings, and those will be, targeted for the people we want to have there. The public meeting, which is what I think you're thinking about, these are the meetings where all that information and everything which has been developed will be presented, but there's also going to be the ability to have public comment, public input, and they will be advertised meetings. We expect to see a lot of people there. We expect to see people from the bar there. We expect to see it with a lot of participation. Obviously, to get through the business of the day, we're going to have to, some of that business is going to have to be done in a presentation mode, and there'll be interactive mode. But we think that these workshops will be a full day, 8, even 9 hours of a day to get these things done.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Applebaum, Mr. Dever, how are you going to advertise? How are you going to reach out? In today's world with social media and everything, how do you intend to reach out? And surely, even though they're public meetings, you're wanting to have, you want people who have something to offer besides an opinion, right? Not there's anything wrong with an opinion, but you're looking to have people who are informed in this area who will interact and help push the ball forward, correct? And how would you, how do you let those people know about these meetings and their dates, et cetera?
I would make a few comments, and let me point out also, and I do want to make one point clear, that the consultants that we have retained in programming have done this all over the country. They know something about best practices in terms of outreach. We're going to, prior to the first meeting, we're going to obviously have our workshop with them to go over what they would recommend. But from my perspective, obviously, first of all, there is the notification process, not that's sufficient, but that's necessary, which is the public, what you would do with any public meeting. But, we will reach out to, cleveland.com and to others, advertise the meeting, and we'll also go to organizations. There are critical organizations that have expressed their interest. I'll give you one example. Over the weekend, I happened to be talking with folks from the Metropolitan Bar Association. While they're not represented as one of the 12 on the committee, they have an interest in this, and we're going to reach out to them and make sure that they take care of that. We'll reach out to others in the community that we know have an interest, but we'll also broadly advertise these meetings.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And by the way, any other thoughts or suggestions that anyone here has, welcome to receive them.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Chair. A couple things. One is, on the same topic, our mayors would be a good list. They should know what it is that we're considering or debating, and they certainly have a role in the outcome. So I would ask that you reach out to all of our mayors and encourage them through their resources to get the word out.
Good idea.
Yeah, I think actually I'll look towards Michelle Pomerantz, and I think that may be the
Thanks.
opportunity through the Mayors and Managers Association to do that.
The second I wanted to ask is, my prior lives of building new school buildings or building anything, libraries, or sometimes the excitement of building something new, has a larger momentum than renovation. And so I would ask that we give serious consideration to both, and that a full gut, perhaps, of the building that exists could be part of a conversation. I understand that the way it is now is not set up correctly, and in today's world, it does not work. But, there certainly are things that we could at least discuss and consider in renovating. When I say renovating, I mean a full renovation of both jail and courthouse facilities that perhaps can be used within a structure that is sound. And I would just make sure that we don't get on that momentum of new that overshadows perhaps what we could otherwise be doing.
And I would comment, we, for a long period of time, back when this effort was even thought about a few years ago, there was great concern that people were rushing to a conclusion. And I can assure you that that is not happening in this process. We've made it abundantly clear to everybody involved. In fact, one of the criteria that we had for selection, quite honestly, that was satisfied with this group was actually having taken projects like this and ended up with a renovation solution. So we know that we're going to put all of the options on the table. we're going to put the option, and it could even be a situation where something on the site is renovated, but something can't be. Every option will be on the table. And because everybody involved with this process assumes that, that every aspect of this decision-making will be so heavily scrutinized that we have to get to the right solution. So I guarantee you that there will be no preconceived notion, that the process will go to the right solution.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Anyone else? Okay, Jeff. Thanks for your presentation. And I represent the council through the president on the committee. And I think it's important to know that by hiring these folks, they're experts. We are not. We are in the room to learn and to follow their recommendations, not to create an atmosphere of I want. It's what we need, not what we want. And I think if we keep that in mind, we'll get to the goal line that is specified. Speaking of goal lines, about a year ago, Mike, this portion was about $500,000. That was a ballpark. We're at 1.4 million. We in a bigger ballpark?
Yeah, actually, we are at that 1.4 now, and the reason why is that was an estimated cost, and it was well over a year ago that I had put that out there. But we've been developing the scope as we've gone along. We've learned a lot more since January of 18 than I would suggest since when we started this discussion till now. So I'm trying to make sure we do that broad brush stroke and get everything right this first time around. And I feel the scoping that we've gone through with DLR now, I think it's pretty comprehensive. It gives us a little bit more latitude if something else arises along the way here. But I feel pretty good about what we have. So, it's unfortunate I did put that number out there. But like
No,
I said.
I'm sure we asked, and we asked the ballpark, and that's, I'm not being negative, I'm just, things get more expensive the more time you take, and, this might be one of those things. And I know you've broadened the scope of this. Sure. So, Jeff, is there any project out there similar to what we're talking about here in Cuyahoga County nationwide that we should be possibly looking at as to what we're getting into?
There's several, and by the way, and there's several projects that started out and failed and had to be rethought.
Was that Detroit?
That would be one. And, as a matter of fact, and they may not be the same solution that we need here, but I will tell you, Detroit is a project that started out, and the original team is no longer part of that project. They're also not part of this project, by the way. They went a certain direction. And another example that's similar to what we're going through right now is in Indianapolis. They are similarly going through almost the exact same process of looking at a downtown combined facility. Now, their solutions happen to be new campuses. Their solutions, and they're not, precisely downtown. They may or may not be the right solution for here. But I will tell you, there are many, many examples throughout the country of different solutions, and we have a broad-based group of programmers who know them all and have been and have seen them. So I'm just going to say, until further notice, there is no preconceived notion. But I agree with you. It is what we need. We can't afford, frankly, to satisfy everyone's wish list. But what we can do is come up with a tremendous facility that takes care of our justice needs, and that's what we'll do.
Right. And I would remind the committee and the council that ultimately, after this is all done and decisions are made, it comes back to this council for approval. So the council has to have the final comfort level that the committee will have once it's delivered here. So in the end, we are the ultimate decision maker, and then we send that to the executive, who ultimately is the person that's going to make that final decision. But the nuts and bolts are in this committee. The nuts and bolts come back here assembled to a certain point. We tighten the screws and then send it to the administration for their final approval. And hopefully, the way we have it set up, everybody's comfortable that we'll be able to produce a justice facility, jail facility that will take us into at least a 50-year, maybe 50-year lifespan. I know that's pushing it a little bit, but we'll learn all that too, that some of these buildings have a lifespan. So, is there anything else?
Mr. Chairman,
And we would need this move forward so we can get moving for the May meeting.
if you could, Mr. Chairman, second reading suspension
So
would be helpful.
if the committee's comfortable with moving Resolution 2019-0095 to the full council under suspension of the rules at the next meeting, I'll accept the motion. In a second, all in favor? Against? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
2019-0100.
Resolution number 2019-0100, authorizing a contract with Motorola Solutions in the amount not to exceed $844,399 in connection with the Cleveland Shared Surveillance Camera Project and Video Management System.
Good afternoon, Council, Councilman Gallagher. Everyone. We're here today to ask for a second reading suspension of rules on this resolution that will deal with the installation and replacements of cameras for the surveillance system with the City of Cleveland, as well as the video management system. This will be procured off both 2016 and 2017 Urban Area Security Initiative grants for the total of $844,399. We're asking for a second reading because of the second reading suspension rules, because of the June 30th, 2016 UASI grant deadline, in order to make sure we meet those deadlines for installation. I've asked Larry Jones, who is an assistant commissioner with the City of Cleveland's IT and project manager on this, to give a brief description due to the technical aspects of it for this body, and to be here for any questions that may be asked.
And Alex, would you
Yes,
introduce
sir.
yourself to the
Oh,
committee?
excuse me. Alex Pelham, Director of Public Safety and Justice Services.
Thank you. Yes, sir. Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, council members. Larry Jones II from the City of Cleveland. So from 2008 until present, we've maintained a video surveillance system throughout downtown Cleveland, also into the city neighborhoods. Recently, earlier this year, the mayor announced his expansion of that system to citywide to include rec centers, business districts, and parks. So the downtown system is essentially our hub. So downtown cameras support not only our emergency operations center, but it also supports our 3rd District Police operations and also the other 5 districts as well. This system has been critical not only in real lifetime viewing, but also evidentiary and going back after the fact. Where cameras are recorded live, but cameras are viewed live at times and also recorded for 30 days of storage. So that gives officers the ability to go back and get forensic video evidence and also assist with solving cases. And I'm here to answer any other questions you may have about the program or the system.
Questions from the committee? Yes, ma'am.
Just one on the dates, 2 months. Is that what I'm reading here? For the period 4/24/19 to 6/30/19?
Through the chair to Councilwoman Baker, yes, the June 30th would be the final installation date to coincide with the UIC 16 grant guidance and end date, yes.
And follow-up, I heard grant, so is this paid for completely through a grant? I don't see it mentioned in here, it might be in the
Chair.
detail.
Through the chair to Councilwoman Baker, yes, ma'am, this will be 100% fully funded through the federal grant. There's no local match.
Thank you.
Anything further? Okay, Larry Jones, that would be you'd be the son of the judge?
Yes, that's correct.
He's a very, very good man. If everybody's comfortable. He's in a better place now. He will tell you that. If everyone's comfortable on the committee to move Resolution 2019-0100 to the full council under suspension of the rules, I accept the motion.
Second.
All in favor? Against? Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, sir.
For discussion purposes, we had an issue with the $300,000 grant, as the councilwoman said, a grant. And we had to send it back And Ms. Carney, could you fill us in on just what your thoughts are, what happened? Seems to me that there might be rival stories out here, so I'd like to just get to the bottom of what happened.
Sure.
And if you could start at the beginning, let the committee understand what this was for, what its purpose was, possibly what went wrong, and what our next step is as far as returning the money. I'd also like to know, there was an issue, it was used for something else. I'd like to know what that something else was and who authorized that.
Absolutely, Councilman. So thank you, Brandy Carney, Chief of Public Safety and Justice Service for the county. I've detailed some information here I'll read. Myself and Hugh are happy to answer questions. Unfortunately, we don't have a Department of IT representative here with us also.
And we did request that Mr. Young be here specifically because he made a statement with a reporter on TV that seems to be juxtaposed with what I've heard. And not making any judgment, just want to figure out what's going on.
Understood, sir. So some brief background on AFIS itself. AFIS stands for our Automated Fingerprint Identification System and is used throughout the county and region within law enforcement, including jails, as well as the medical examiner's office as another tool for maintaining, verifying, and sharing fingerprint data. In 2016, I was director of our Department of Public Safety and Justice Services. Public Safety Justice Services is not part of the AFIS project then or now or the local AFIS board. However, I was made aware of money needed for our AFIS system. Due to Department of Public Safety's responsibility as the state designated fiscal officer for Homeland Security grant funding that comes into the county, I made a request to the state and was granted approximately $300,000 in funding for this project. The medical examiner's office, one of the main AFIS stakeholders, and has been involved with AFIS. To provide knowledge of this item, we also have Hugh Shannon, the administrator for the ME, that's available and can provide some detailed timeline or answer some of your questions. But I can briefly speak to some of the grant side and what's occurred also here. On March 11, 2019, myself, Alex Pelham, Dr. Gilson, and Hugh and others sent a letter to Ohio Emergency Management Agency, who is the state office that receives grant money from the feds and in turn allocates the money to us as the fiscal agent. In this initial letter, we self-reported that money that had been provided to the county for AFIS was not being used as the intended purpose, and that we intended to repay the entire amount of the initial purchase back as a reimbursement. Following receipt of that letter, we were asked for an in-person meeting with Ohio EMA. Myself, Hugh, Shannon, and Alex Pelham drove to Columbus and met with them on April 3rd in order to discuss what had occurred and how we can ensure that it would not happen again. Amongst other items, we explained that for over 2 years, Department of Public Safety now makes all grant purchases rather than allowing other entities, such as IT, to make a purchase. We have local procurement requirements, but when you have a grant, you also have to follow federal requirements. So that measure, even prior to this, had been put in place, which speaks towards the item before me today. We are now discussing a City of Cleveland item because now we are procuring all items and don't sub-grant to others. Just like for IT in the past, they would procure items. Now we will procure all those items. We're able to track and record that equipment also. So, this ensures that federally required guidelines for procurement, inventory, and asset management are followed in addition to local policies. Ohio EMA did ask that we conduct a more in-depth review of the specific location of the equipment and use of the procured equipment at that time. Following that meeting, Ohio EMA did speak with FEMA about this item and the purchase and offered our explanation on steps taken for future purchases, along with our self-reporting and full return of the funding that was provided. While the review of that issue at hand was not completed in its entirety, which I'll explain in a moment here. We did believe when we left that meeting, and still do, that there won't be any additional repercussions from this item, such as issues in the future receiving grant money overall. We wanted to make sure that this wouldn't hinder that overall process. In order to meet the state's request of a second validation of equipment that was not being utilized, I asked our IT department for a more in-depth review and detail on the current system and its use. During our April 3rd meeting at the state, we relayed to the state the equipment was not being used at all, that it had been purchased, but it was not in use. However, as a result of a more in-depth technical review, we were provided additional information from IT, which stated that the APHIS equipment procured was being used, just not for the intended purpose specific to APHIS at that time. Following this newly disclosed information, we sent a follow-up letter to the state last Friday, just to clarify this one item, but to again reinforce that we did disclose initially the issue, and we were, in addition to self-reporting, providing the full amount of money in return, and that the county IT department does intend to repay the entire amount of money. To date, we have not heard of additional follow-up from the state regarding our second letter, but at this time, I don't foresee any issues moving forward or concerns receiving Homeland Security grant money. So I'm happy to provide specifics or details. Again, Hugh has been involved with this project from the beginning, but that's where we're at this point.
Who made the decision not to properly use this money? Because you said it was used for something else. What was the something else?
Do you want to speak to that, or do you want me to? So
Or do
I
we-
can speak to
or
that.
do
It
you
was
know? If
purchased.
you don't know, you don't know.
So it was when it was received, it's our understanding it was hooked up at the state data center that we have in Columbus, that the county has. And at that time, it was hooked up to the larger system. And so as part of that, a grant requirement for this equipment is that it is solely used for this intended purpose, which would be APHIS.
Right. And what was it used for?
Do you?
I think that's an IT question.
Unfortunately, IT can speak to that. They had said that the space was still available to us, but
This was your grant. You wrote it, you got it, and you don't know what they used it for.
so to the councilman, I can tell you that I requested the money. We weren't part of APHIS, as we do. We administer money for many projects.
Sure.
We had followed up diligently with this project. Ultimately found that while the space is still available for those servers that were purchased, I can't say definitively, but there were other public safety or other items from the county that may be on those servers. But I would ask that that's an IT question. We did ask for additional detailed information, and I can't speak to that from any of the detail I received in writing, at least.
Fair
Is
enough.
that fair?
Mr. Shannon, do you have anything to add here?
So the medical examiner's office now manages APHIS with the city of Cleveland. It used to be in the sheriff's office. It allows the jail to, when they're doing booking, to collect fingerprints. We use them with stations out in the field to allow local police departments to access information. And we also use it in-house at the medical examiner's office to fingerprint decedents that come through our office. The system is old. It's been in use for nearly a decade now. We have had long discussions about its eventual replacement. At the time that the grant was being procured by public safety, we were in the process of moving the legacy system, the existing APHIS system. It was at Cleveland. The particular site that it was at was being abandoned. Then we were going to move it either to Columbus or to public safety in Cleveland. That discussion was going on. The discussion also took place at that time was, if we're going to go to the trouble to move it, maybe we should try to replace the hardware to give it a little bit more life. The next gen systems are very pricey. We've hired consultants on another grant to give us a better sense of how to do that. All of these conversations are taking place in parallel. We can't afford to wait for one project to be over before we start planning for the next. So we have a legacy system that is now expiring. We need to do what we call a refresh upgrade. It'll basically put new hardware out with an upgrade to the software. And then we still have to look down the road for the next gen systems, which will incorporate a lot of other technology to allow facial recognition, iris detection, DNA, et cetera. So again, we're having all these conversations. We're trying to refresh the hardware as we're moving it. We got $300,000 from the state. Our office, the medical examiner's office, put up another $350,000 to get the rest of the hardware that was required, but we made clear that by this date, it needed to be done. When that was purchased and sent to Columbus, that was kind of really the last involvement that we had with that piece of it. What we found out now that it's 2019 and we're moving forward with actually doing the refresh and the upgrade, utilizing those components would have helped us moving forward. We were getting those lists of inventory and sending those to our consultants to give us a better idea of what cost savings we might see. That's kind of when we came across the fact that they were not necessarily just sitting idle. They've been in some type of use. We're still not 100% sure how that works. Down in Columbus, the system that they have works in a virtual environment. And so that's what we were trying to untangle for ourselves and for the state. So that's pretty much how we came across this information.
And you're still untangling that?
Again, once we did in fact realize, Councilman, this year, and specifically realize that it was not being used for the intended purpose, we did notify the state and said we would be returning the money, and started this process and had sent that to them.
So you got a grant for a certain purpose. It went down to Columbus for that purpose. Unbeknownst to you, it was used for a different purpose. We're not clear yet what that purpose is. But IT can answer that. And Mr. Young has said in an interview that it was sitting in a corner down in Columbus.
So just to clarify, Councilman, when we went down to the state, it was not to verify the equipment, it was to go down to talk to the state about the
Right.
letter we submitted after we had realized that that equipment was not in use as we had thought that it had been. We notified them, but any specifics on that detail, yes, I would ask that IT provide that detail.
Okay, and you've asked IT for that?
We have asked for detail. They did provide some detail, but we haven't received anything specific to what may or may not be on the equipment.
When did you ask for that?
We asked for throughout the year. As I stated here, after that first meeting, the state said, we will be speaking with the feds this Friday. Please provide us with additional detail. We did come back, and that's when, in fact, we realized that it actually was being in use, but we still didn't receive the detail on exactly what the use was of the system.
Okay, but you've asked IT for an explanation and you haven't gotten a satisfactory or full explanation.
Councilman, they did provide some information that the space is still available in the virtual environment, but again, I would ask that the IT professionals answer
Right.
that question for you, sir.
Some explanation is not a full explanation. And I would expect that if a director who got this grant can't get that from IT, from the director of IT, that we have a problem. And I think there's a bigger problem here. I just don't know what it is. I think you have every right to be upset if you're not getting the information needed. And if they're not going to give you the information needed, and the medical examiner is out basically $300,000 with City of Cleveland for the fingerprint system, I can only assume that was important. and now we have to send it back, I'm going to assume further that you're going to be coming to us for $300,000 or more to help you out on something that you were so kind to get in a grant form.
So if I could just speak, IT did say that out of their current operating budget, they would need to purchase servers anyway. However, again, I would defer that question, but that's where they had planned on using these servers after this reimbursement is given back to the state. I would just like to say, you know, in no way the grants team in public safety in my office has done a great job administering these grants, and so we would never want anything negative to come out of these. We wanted to make sure to self-report this and to make sure both the state and the feds were okay, as well as this body, that it would not happen and measures were put in place because we don't want this to ever happen. And we purchased many, many items throughout a year, millions of dollars worth, as you know.
I'm anything but concerned about you and what's underneath you. My concern is that somebody in IT evidently made a decision without your knowledge to use this money for something else, to the point where you self-reported, sent it back, and you stated it's not going to be held against us going forward, which is a good thing, but we still haven't gotten to the bottom line of what happened there on the IT side. Mr. Young was personally invited to be here today, and I understand he took a personal day and he has resigned effective a couple weeks. I would suggest that was probably a good thing he didn't come here today, because I don't know if he can answer it, because he hasn't answered you. So we need to get to an answer, and I'm gonna talk to the president after this meeting's done. I think we need to send a recommendation to the IG to, if he hasn't already started investigating this, should be investigating this, so you can get your answers, Mr. Shannon, you can get your answers, and the council can get our answers, which seem to be all the same question. How the IT department doesn't just tell you what happened, this is where things get really wrong and make us perk our ears up. I mean, if there was a mistake made, we're all human, we get it. Are there any questions? Yes, ma'am.
Yes, and as a proponent of trying to break the silence, which is, seems to be happening once in a while around here, I would suggest that the IG and our internal auditor get involved. I mean, these are both, it sounds like it's exactly what they're in place here to do. Outside of your world, they're an independent asset that we have that can perhaps get the answers that you're having trouble receiving. And that would be my suggestion.
Sure, and we don't have a problem with that. I would say that when this first started, the procurement happened with another individual with IT who is no longer here. So there was some turnover since this project initiated many years ago. And that individual hasn't been here for a few years too.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman?
Anyone else?
I'm
Yes,
sorry.
sir.
I just want to add, so I just want to clarify that IT did confirm to us that it was not used for the intended purpose. I think there are technical details that we would be more comfortable that they explain to you about how and why.
Which is why they were invited here and no one showed up, so I think I got my answer.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Quick question,
Yes,
Mr.
sir.
Chairman, just real briefly. So what is the status of that money now? You said they intended to return it. Has it been returned, or is there a plan in place?
Sure, Council. So, Councilman, it's on a fiscal agenda to appropriate the money for the end of this month. Again, that would come out of the IT's budget, appropriate the money, and then the Public Safety Department will work with the state to return that full amount from them. So I expect that to happen over the next 2 months, but that appropriation has to be approved on a fiscal agenda first.
Okay, and just to clarify then, you indicated that this situation doesn't necessarily preclude you from getting further grant monies from the state for this particular project.
Sure, Councilman. Again, when we went and talked to the state, that was obviously one of our concerns at that time. They seemed understanding, and that didn't seem to be the case. We did provide this follow-up letter with additional detail and clarification, but at this point in time, I don't see that being a concern, and I hope that maintains that way.
Okay, I do
Yeah.
too. Okay, thank you.
Okay, yes, ma'am.
Is it a possibility that once we reimburse the state, that they could give it back to us for the initial use it was intended for? Or?
Unfortunately, Councilwoman, with the way Homeland Security grants operate, their 3-year grant period, that closeout already completed. So it would not be an option for this money for us to give it back. You know, possibly a future request could be for APHIS, but that would have to be out of a separate grant and additional money that would be available.
Anything further? Okay, thank you for what you could give us.
Thank you.
We greatly appreciate it. And is there any miscellaneous business? Hearing none. Thank you.